And if this was the message she was getting, that it's okay for the one person who's supposed to keep her safe and is supposed to teach her how to keep herself safe is the person who's allowed to cause pain to her body, like, what am I really teaching her?
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Reesa and I'm your host. We are talking to real families about real stories here on The Real Family Eats, where we've got food for thought and thoughtful food. So let's eat. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I am so excited for today's episode. I have Blaize joining us today. Hi, Blaize. Thanks so much for joining. I am so thankful for your willingness to come on and to chat with us as parents.
Thank you so much for having me, Reesa.
Yes. Okay, so for anybody who's listening who doesn't know you, can you introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, I'm Blaize. I run Weeping Willow Wellness, where I offer a one-on-one somatic healing program called the Whole Body Communicator. I'm sure I'll talk more about it later. I also offer clothing optional embodiment activities for that type of healing.
Mm.
I am an artist, an entrepreneur, a single parent to one child, and way too many animals. We have a dog, two cats, a foster puppy, eight chickens. We used to have a turtle. We have a lot of animals in this house at all times.
Oh my goodness.
And
Full
I'm really
house.
passionate. It sure is. I'm really passionate about sharing my voice as a healer and an artist. So I also make music under the name Fermata Blaze, and I've written screenplays. I'm an actor, director, writer, all the things.
Love it. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Before we jump more into your story as far as your parenting journey and what you've experienced, what you've learned,
Yeah.
you're sharing a recipe with us. Tell us what recipe you are sharing with our parents today and why did you choose this one?
Yes. So this one is familiarly known as special sauce.
Okay.
And it's a pasta dish, so usually we make it over spaghetti. My mom kind of invented it. She always had a garden when I was growing up, and so it's ideally as fresh as you can get it, fresh tomatoes, fresh basil, green olives, feta cheese, and olive oil. Just super, super simple. Everything is chopped up to
Okay.
just a nice size. You can always throw it all in a food processor, but I like when it's more individually chopped up and more chunky. It lets the flavors come through. And I chose this one because it's super simple and easy, but it still feels like you made something kind of impressive. It looks really pretty and colorful on the plate. It's really healthy, and it's really fast.
Yeah. Which parents, right? We need something that we can kind of put together. And I love, like you said, that it's something that we can maybe feel good about
Yeah,
putting together without necessarily taking a ton of mental capacity that, let's face it, we
exactly.
don't always have.
Absolutely. I've made it for lots of guests, and everyone's always been like, "Wow, this is so good. Like, I'm gonna make this at home. How did you do it?" And then when they actually look at the ingredients, they're like, "Oh, this is actually so simple."
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, speaking of, so is it just I am just chopping everything up and kind of throwing it in a bowl and mixing it?
Yeah, pretty much. And you can kind of
Okay.
eyeball, like some people like more olive oil. I like a little bit less. I don't like it to be just like smothered in olive oil. You can
Yeah.
eyeball how much portion wise, how much looks good. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, I can do that. So I will get started on my end while we chat. And so I know we were talking a little bit before this about kind of your journey in particular as far as being a single parent and kind of what maybe challenges that presented in itself, but also it sounds like kind of learning a couple lessons along the way. Is that a fair way to say it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, I think it would be remiss to say any parenting journey doesn't have its lessons.
that's a fair statement
If we're
for
going
sure.
in with our eyes and ears and mind wide open, at least.
So, can you talk to us a little bit about um, how that learning piece, how some of those challenges kind of started for your journey, and walk us through some of that?
Yeah. So I became a parent right when I moved to LA. I had moved to LA shortly after college to pursue my acting journey. I'd been in New York for a little bit and was looking for a change of scenery. I was in a super unhealthy relationship in New York, which definitely colored that experience a little grayer. And so I was starting a new chapter, and then pretty much just a couple months after being here, I got pregnant.
Okay.
And so it was a really big, like, disruption moment for sure for me, where I had
Yeah.
to really reassess, like, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I ultimately did make the choice to step into single parenthood, knowing that I would be alone from the start. Um, and something that you mentioned earlier is just talking about how parenting can be super isolating. And that experience was especially true for me as a single parent. But I think it's really true for people in nuclear families as well. You know, when you first step into those early days of having a
Mm-hmm.
newborn, a lot of people will be well-meaning and well-intentioned, well-wishing. A lot of people said, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna bring you food. I'll come hang out with your baby." And at least for me, I was in a new place and I had made a few friends, you know, in the first few months
Okay.
while I was here and during my pregnancy, but it wasn't like I had a long-standing community. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
friends in acting classes or whatever will have nice intentions, but it's not how it panned out. And so I had a lot of weeks and months where I was really alone in an extremely challenging experience of being the sole caretaker of this tiny person
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and not really having like the resources that, you know, would have been great. Um, and so it was a real challenge to be with my own mind so much because I was giving her so much presence, of course, but she's not giving me a lot back.
Okay.
Sh- Babies can communicate, of course, but it's just me. Like, I'm the
Yeah.
only adult. There's no one else to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a lot of time to just be with my own thoughts and my own mind.
I'm curious for you because you're so spot on, and I think I've heard that from so many parents as far as going into that, and this desire to, yes, want to kind of pour into this child and hope that they're successful and they're thriving and they're doing all the things, that sometimes it can kind of really drain a parent, of themselves, and kind of, like you mentioned, maybe even some of the thoughts are just that you're left alone, especially when you're up for those really, I don't know about you, but those 2 a.m., 3 a.m. feeds when it's super quiet,
Yeah.
and even babies just kind of chill out. Like, yeah, my, thoughts were loud. And so I'm curious for you, what did you find was kind of coming up in those moments for you?
Yeah, I mean, I know you said we can be super raw here, so I will be really honest. There were moments, especially when we were sick. When we were sick, it was really, really hard, being alone because, you know, when you're really not feeling well, that's when you just really notice how much you need someone else because you're just
Yeah.
struggling to do the bare minimum to take care of yourself. Like going and getting a glass of water feels difficult, right? It's
Wow.
that thing of like, man, I wish someone was here to just bring me some water because I can't get out of bed right now. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just me and my baby.
Yeah.
And so I had some moments during those early days where I really wondered, like, what if I just passed away? And like, how long would it take someone to notice? How
Mm.
long would it take, you know, how long would it take someone to come and like find her and take care of her at least? Like, just
Yeah.
really, really dark thoughts, you know?
Mm-hmm. And so when that's happening, especially like you mentioned, being so alone, and um, did you mention, did you have any kind of family system
Mm-mm.
out here? Was it was just you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, in that, like, how do you navigate that alone while being, I imagine, kind of sleep deprived and
Hmm.
just emotionally drained? What was that like for you?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it got really dark in moments. And even thinking back to those feelings, like I can get choked up right now. Like I could start crying right now just thinking back to how I felt at that time. And I think what really supported me was my strong connection to nature and to my
Okay.
body and to movement. So, I picked this recipe with my mom. I said she always had a garden growing up. And so she always had us outside gardening, hiking. We would play the listening game, noticing what sounds in nature we could hear. And, you know, for everything that maybe I needed to reparent from my own childhood,
Yeah.
that is one of the many things my mom did do really, really right is instill in us this deep connection with nature. And so even when things were really, really hard and I was isolated and I didn't feel like I had a strong friend group or any family out here, I would get my daughter and my dog, thank goddess for my dog also. Like literally I call my dog my actual life partner because she's been the one who's been with me through the early days of single parenthood, my abusive relationship in New York, my battle with cancer, like so much.
Wow.
So, so yeah, so I would get my daughter and my dog out to a hike and we would just
Okay.
be in the woods and I would be wearing my baby either front or back, in a backpack.
Mm-hmm.
And that movement and that connection with nature would bring me back into relationship with the world. Even if I didn't feel like I had community,
Yeah.
and this is not all the time. I do have community. I do have friends. And I think like when we're doing well, we can see that and we can reach out to people and we can build that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to highlight is like in some of those darkest moments where you're really getting into the worst thoughts, like what if I died? No one would notice that level of darkness. Like it
Yeah.
can be hard to realize who cares. It can be hard to realize who would be thrilled if you called them, who would happily pick up
Mm-hmm.
the phone, right? And so when I felt like I couldn't even reach out to anyone and I felt like I felt totally alone, at least getting outside and being in connection with nature brought me back into the world and brought me back into perception, brought me back into my sensory experience, brought me back into my breath.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and then also earlier in my life, I dabbled in yoga, and early in my pregnancy, it became clear that I could no longer bodybuild, which
Okay.
was a previous chapter of my life. And so I had gotten really into yoga,
Okay.
and my yoga practice had become a core somatic tool
Mm-hmm.
throughout my pregnancy. And so that was something I leaned on. Um, even if I felt like I couldn't do anything else, I could come back to some of these poses and movements and check in with sensation of stretching and breathing and connecting breath to movement, and that would bring me back.
Yeah. What I love about all of that is it sounds just really kind of taking you out of that mind space and really bringing you into your body, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Exactly.
And I love that because sometimes, you know, doing what I do, mindfulness is a big buzzword, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, we think of mindfulness for a lot of folks, especially if you're not super familiar with maybe the different types of mindfulness, and that it can vary. That there's this kind of idea of like, I'm not very good at using my imagination, and kind of, well, if my brain is already super dark and I go into my mind, like that's just not
Mm-hmm.
helpful. And so that's why I love grounding, and I don't feel like it gets as much maybe airtime as like mindfulness, and the grounding piece. What I love is it gets you kind of more, like you said, into your body, and so really using, it sounds like, kind of those other senses that you
Mm-hmm.
have to really unlock kind of even just a momentary pause to kind of get out of the thoughts that are really kind of weighing you down, and trying to kind of, because our brains are really good at telling us all those, like you said, when you're in it, it becomes a really easy path to go down. There's no one I can reach out to. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I feel like it's such a natural thing that for whatever reason our brains are just like super good at. And
Mm-hmm.
so being able to kind of give your brain just enough of a break to get, like you said, into your body. And so I love that.
Yeah, our analytical brains are always going to try to take over and problem solve because so much of our life puts us in a top-down space,
Yes.
right? So our brains are always like, it's my job, it's my job. And so I almost think of real mindfulness as bodyfulness. Like, let's just
Mm.
change the word
Right?
because our minds are freaking full, okay? We don't need more full minds. But if
Hmm.
we bring our awareness down into our body, that's where we can actually let go of the analyzer part
Yeah.
and sensation track and connect with our breath and not need to make meaning of it all right away and not need to solve and just be in our experience.
Mm-hmm. And man, the freedom to kind of, like you said, reframe that we don't need to solve it right now, that that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted to take a pause for anybody who's listening who's maybe not familiar with, you mentioned top down
Hmm.
versus, body.
Yeah.
And so, can you, for anybody listening, kind of give us a little bit, at least your definition of what that is, so they have an understanding of when you're saying top down, what are we meaning by that?
Yeah. So essentially, we have a continuous communication loop between our thinking brain, or mind, we call it, but our thinking brain really is what we mean by that, and our body, our sensory perception. And a lot of times, because of the setup of our life, right? We're on our phones all the time. We're emailing, we're on social media, we're taking phone calls. Right now, we're on a podcast talking. We end up stuck in our thinking brain where we're meaning making, we're using words, we're using analysis, we're creating narrative, and we start to disconnect sometimes from our, we think like bottom half, our sensation tracking, our physical body experience. And in order to stay in balance as humans, we need some some level of, maybe not exactly equal, but some balance of input from our body sensations and our brain chatter.
Mm-hmm.
I love,
Yeah.
I think it's Dr. Dan Siegel wrote the book Intraconnected. I think it's Siegel.
Yes.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And so,
Love him. Love his
yes,
work.
yes. And so his book Intraconnected actually looks at a definition of the mind, right? Because we think about the mind, but a lot of us don't have a definition for what that is. We think the mind is the brain, and it's totally not. His definition of the mind is actually everything, every relationship we're part of, the entire world around us, everything we can perceive. It's why when people are in solitary confinement, or like me early in my parenting, too
Yeah.
isolated, we lose our minds
Mm-hmm.
because our actual mind is our interconnectedness with the world around us, with the natural world, with our loved ones and friendships, with our careers, with everything. And, it's why also I think a lot of high-powered career people, we think that like are really focused on their career. We also think of them as kind of losing their minds because they're so focused on a certain part of their experience, their world, that maybe they're losing touch with the natural world. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how I don't know how political we want to make this, so I won't name which CEOs I'm thinking of right now. But we
Okay.
we all know there's some CEOs in the world who are losing touch with the natural world and how important that is.
Yeah.
Um, and their minds are actually, I believe, not healthy because they aren't
Mm.
in connection with the natural world and with how important nature is. And so having a balanced mind means being connected in a balanced way with nature, with our loved ones, with everything around us, and with our bodies. So when I say top down, it's when that thinking brain goes pew, 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 and gets stuck, and we're not able to, what am I receiving from my connection to my breath? What am I
Mm-hmm.
receiving from, I didn't even feel the chair I was in all day. Like, what does the chair feel like? What is whoa, my low back has something going on. I didn't even notice all day until I tried to go to bed, you
Yeah.
know? Um,
Absolutely.
So that top-down processing is when our thinking brain or our analyzing brain is chattering away and we're not receiving anything. And
Mm-hmm.
then bottom-up processing is something we practice a lot in somatic work, where we are intentionally turning our attention to sensation tracking, to what can we receive from the neck down. And we're processing that way, like when I notice the chair, I feel the chair's texture. I check in with my hand, my breath, and now going bottom up, there's an entirely different mental experience happening now than when I was
Yeah,
going top down.
absolutely. And I think some of that, and you can tell me if you disagree, I think some of, like you said, that training, right, of really kind of the brain is our thinking mind is kind of king. That's where we get, especially I find so many parents where we kind of almost train ourselves out of that gut instinct and listening to the
Yes.
body.
Yes.
And I think so much of that is, at least in my experience, is some of that because we just kind of, are told from a really young age, we gotta be in school, we gotta be learning all these things, and it's
Mm-hmm.
mind, 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 mind,
Mm-hmm.
and we just get so good at going. My body is trying to send me signals. Well, no, 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 I don't have time for that because that's not serving me.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think of my own child right now, and she's been experiencing chronic pain for a little over a year actually, and she's only 7, which is really, really disheartening. And we're doing a lot to figure that out. But she already has that um, awareness, that interoceptive awareness, where she's able to tell me when I sit too long at school, my body tightens up. I can feel it. And she's being instructed, to not do anything about that, basically. And so
Yeah.
I've had a lot of conversations with the administration and her teachers, just saying, we need to empower these kids to take movement breaks, to listen to their bodies, to advocate for their needs, because I get that it's a lot easier if an entire classroom of kids will just sit still and go from one activity to the next all day with,
Mm-hmm.
a 15-minute snack break and a 30-minute lunch break, but
Yeah.
that's not how their bodies are designed to act at this age.
Even an
And
adult,
not how
right?
any
I
of our
mean,
bodies, right, literally. So, yeah, I mean, there's reasons why, some of these big companies, um, for whatever they're doing, right or wrong, we hear about these companies like Netflix or Google or Facebook or whatever having ping pong tables and meditation rooms and all this stuff for their coders because they actually understand that, like, from a sheer business numbers standpoint, like, you're going to get the most out of your people when they're actually somatically resourced and
yeah.
effective because you can chain them to a desk all day, but they're not going to get any more work done because their brains are going to max out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's the same thing with these kids. Like, unless we get them up and moving all day throughout the day, they're not going to learn anything. There's some quote, I think it's Einstein, maybe. I just read it, read it on Instagram, but it's something about like we learn through play, like 20 times faster than any other way.
Yeah. I believe
And
it.
yeah, so we got to move, we got to play.
Yeah. And I think going back to right when on the parenting side and kind of getting caught in maybe this cycle of we need to kind of just push on, ignoring some of the body stuff,
Yeah.
and the signals that are being sent. For you, I'm curious, like how I heard you mention, you got back into nature, which I love. Um, was that your aha moment, or was it still a journey for you, kind of figuring out how do you navigate, especially kind of the single parenthood
Hmm.
of being able to trust more of your body and to um, allow some of that space of even, potentially, like I heard you mention, I do have a community. Like, were you able to kind of find your way to reaching out to them? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was able to start reaching out to people. Um, I think my real aha moment in my parenting journey where I realized I needed even more tools and even more change. Like hiking was great, yoga was great, but I needed some more tools.
Mm-hmm.
And like you were alluding to earlier, some serious reparenting work on myself.
Yeah.
Um, my daughter was, I think, a little over 2, and trying to decide how self-deprecating I want to go. Um, yeah, I was not showing up how I wanted to as a parent. I was having knee-jerk physical reactions to her triggering me, and was showing up completely overwhelmed, communicating in a way that was not, it was damaging our relationship. Um, and I didn't know how to discipline her in a way that would be effective but also not harmful because that was never taught to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I was spanking her, and that felt horrible. Like, and I only did it a handful of times, but it felt so horrible every time in my body. And I just like knew that this was not how I wanted to be treating this being who's like the most precious being I've ever been in connection with in my whole life, you
Yeah.
know? And at one point in her daycare, she was like roughly grabbed by one of the daycare teachers, like on her arm or something.
Okay.
And she had a little bit of language. She started speaking really early. I think she was like 2.5 or something at this time. I don't remember, but I don't know how she said this. Maybe just remembering somewhere around 2 to 3. And I said to her, like, why did they can't do that to you? And I said, Callie, no one is allowed to hurt you. And she said, okay, mommy, only you're allowed to hurt me.
Wow.
Yeah. And I like, I don't think there's any clearer way to get that what I was doing was not going to be okay or was not
Yeah.
okay. Um, and I mean, it was gutting to hear her say that. And, there's still a lot of parents in my life who subscribe to spanking and subscribe to that. And it's just, and yeah, I don't think it's right.
Mm-hmm.
And everything in me was just screaming that there had to be a better way. And if this was the message she was getting, that it's okay for the one person who's supposed to keep her safe and is supposed to teach her how to keep herself safe is the person who's allowed to cause pain to her
Yeah.
body, like, what am I really teaching her?
Mm.
And so I had this huge aha moment, and thankfully, a friend at the time who had moved away, but she was seeing this parenting coach and gifted me a few sessions to see
Oh,
her, so
wow.
I could get started. Yeah, and that just changed everything because I had someone to turn to who could show me a different way because my body
Mm-hmm.
didn't know a different way.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to be a top down process.
Yeah. How, I mean, for you, I imagine kind of hearing that and then, like you said, maybe not knowing what else to do. How do you make
Mhm.
sense of that? Um, Enough so that it sounds like you were willing to kind of accept the alternative and seeking something different, because I think that's part of a barrier that I've heard, as far as they're almost like a stuckness, that
Yeah.
when you get in it and you're like, well, I don't know, this is what was modeled for me, or this is all that
Hmm.
I've really ever seen, and so I don't really know anything else. Almost a stuckness of like, well, it is what it is. There's really,
Yeah.
how do you move, how did you move from that? Did you find that maybe your protecting self, of like protecting your own identity and kind of your narrative of yourself, did that try to kind of get you stuck and maybe challenge your searching for something different?
Yeah. So it is a process at the same time as I'm learning how to show up differently for her, it is a process of like that forces me to shine a light on what I need to work on in myself and what I need to admit about my own past for sure. Like you said, those identity things. I think part A, we're getting back into that top-down thing. Like I didn't need to make sense of it. Like I kind of liberated that narrative of like, I don't need to know what comes next. I don't need to
Okay.
solve it or fix it. All I know is that I feel bones deep that what is happening right now is wrong.
Mm.
And what happened to me before that put these patterns in my body is wrong. And so if I know that in my body, in my knee-jerk physical reactions, in what I'm experiencing playing out day to day, if I know that's wrong, I feel that gut feeling, like you said, of ick, of hell no in my stomach,
Yeah.
then I don't need to know what comes next. All I need to do is just keep listening to those gut instincts
Mm-hmm.
and it will reveal itself. Just keep trusting that doing the next right thing. So I didn't need to know, like, for sure it's going to be this parenting method, or for sure it's going to be this coach, or this book, or this somatic technique. I didn't need to solve it yet. I needed
Yeah.
to just keep trusting the nudges. And so that's ultimately like how I live my life and how I teach others is to keep keying into those somatic feelings and create a somatic life where we're so connected to that inner knowing, that felt sense
Mm-hmm.
that we don't of course we still problem solve in our life. I'm not saying we never do that, but that's not what's driving us. And
Yeah.
we're so aligned with our own inner knowing that that becomes our safe base. We become our safe home.
Mm.
And relearning that for myself helped me to make sense of everything else eventually. Eventually, it's a long journey.
Well, I
And
was just
so
gonna ask.
then, yeah,
Yeah, go
I was
for
going to
it.
say, then working with multiple different therapists, the parenting coach, multiple somatic healers, retreat processes, long journey, la la la. I was able to actually come to terms with naming things that happened to me as abuse, as assault,
Mm.
whereas before, like they were so normalized into my personhood and into my body, like I didn't call them that. I was just like, well,
Yeah.
that's just stuff that happens to people, like, and I had like normalized it. And so then
Mm-hmm.
that was causing the, generational pattern, the repeat.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to actually eventually, like you said, shine the light, make sense of it, call it what it was, allow those into my identity of like, yes, I have been abused. Yes, I have been assaulted, um, etc.
Yeah. And I want to pause just for a moment because I can absolutely relate. And I think I want to make sure to also mention that for a lot of people, sometimes when our brains do that, that normalizing piece, like you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
because so many of us do, sometimes I get folks that are like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would my body, my brain kind of betray me in that way and in normalizing some of that? And many times I find it does come from our body, our brain's job is to
Yeah.
kind of keep us safe. And sometimes, especially when you're a child and you're experiencing some of those things, it's a
Yeah.
lot safer narrative to kind of normalize and be like, well, this is what it is, and this is maybe what love looks like, or these
Mm-hmm.
are the exceptions, because that's easier, safer to swallow and for our brain to kind of wrap our heads around versus like this is something really damaging or this isn't loving. Like, okay, if they don't love me, right, and if this is how I'm being treated, gosh, that doesn't feel great, so I don't want to even go there. And so sometimes we do kind of create these narratives, and I say that just as a way, hopefully, for anybody listening to kind of also have maybe some compassion and grace towards your brain and body that was trying to kind of keep you safe for all of these years and being able to kind of survive that. Because I 100%, I echo, I remember my first ever therapist when she kind of, when I told her these things and I said it so matter of factly of like, oh, this is just what happens, the dumbfounded look on her face of
Mm-hmm.
like, that's not okay. That's not
Yeah.
normal. Like let's and kind of doing that work, so I can absolutely kind of relate, and wanted to make sure to point that out as well.
Yeah.
um I'm
Absolutely.
I wanted to go back, if it's okay with you, to that idea of giving yourself permission to not necessarily know what
Yeah.
the next step was going to look like. How did you get to that? Was that like an easy shift for you? Was there steps that you took to be able to kind of give yourself that like releasing of pressure?
That's a really good question. Well, this one parenting coach actually has it like in her sign up clause. She's like, as long as you're going to work with me, you're committed to not spanking and not using like punitive, like, you're not going to yell to get your kid to do what they need to do. And so she has it all laid out. And so
Mm-hmm.
that definitely helped me commit to like, okay, we're closing the chapter on that. And I don't know if these tools that she has are going to work.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm at least closing the door on what I know in my body and my heart is not working. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna try her way. And some of what she said was great and some of it wasn't as applicable for me, but like that's the beauty I think of working one-on-one with someone, because whether it's a therapist, a coach, a support person, like you have that accountability to help you commit to at least step one of the change
Mm-hmm.
that you're inviting in. And
Yeah.
then in terms of releasing the pressure, I think it's just that idea of like sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better. I've seen that so many times in my own creative process. Like you have to make a real mess of something, a script, a song, an idea before it actually gels back into something that you're proud of. And so I think it's the same thing with our healing journey. Sometimes what has served us in survival mode has held things together to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And we're essentially asking to like unravel that whole ball of yarn
Yeah.
or smash that glass jar or whatever visual analogy works for you. Um, and it can be a big mess while we put it together in a way that is functional again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so just trusting the mess for the moment. And yeah, giving yourself a lot of grace, a lot of self-care. That coach, every single call, she would end it with, be gentle with yourself. This is hard, be gentle with yourself.
Yeah.
Because it would feel so messy. And so I do really, really advocate for working with a support person, because if I had just tried to like read a book and figure it out, I mean, I had already tried that actually quite a lot.
Mm. Okay.
Um, and so having someone to kind of help remind me how to give myself that grace, reflect back to me ways that she was seeing actual change take place, even when I couldn't see it, even when all I could see was the mess and the chaos and the I don't know what to do, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it's important.
Would you say that's the best way that you found to kind of stay connected through those messy times? Because I can imagine
Yeah.
when you're in it, and like you said, maybe it's getting worse before it's getting better, that it could be really easy to kind of be like, this isn't helping, and all done, and we kind of give up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think definitely staying connected, either a coach or like group coaching programs are also really great. Or even at least like a Facebook group or a meetup group. Like there's so many ways to stay connected with people who are on a similar journey. So yeah, having that accountability and having people who will help remind you how great you're doing, even when
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like it, is really important.
Did you find that there were some times where you encountered people, because reaching out and finding a group, especially like let's say a Facebook group, there'll be some people on there that are super supportive, and I feel like you still run the risk of potentially having those people who like to judge and to have comments based off of what you're doing. Did you find that you encountered that, and if so, kind of was there anything that you did to kind of help navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are those people on groups. That's why I definitely do, if you can, I advocate working one-on-one or at least in a group container that's facilitated by a leader who will kind of help with that,
Yeah.
um, mitigate that at least to a degree. But then also that's where I come back to that continually relearning your own body and your own inner knowing, your own felt sense as your safe place.
Mm.
Because the more you keep learning to trust yourself and keep reminding yourself all the reasons why you can trust yourself and should trust yourself, then you're fortified for when these kinds of comments come in, whether it's from a random stranger on a Facebook group, or a lot of times it'll come from the people in your inner circle who aren't ready to see you change and maybe don't want to face what they would need to face within themselves to be able to fully witness your healing.
Yeah.
Um, that'll definitely come up for a lot of us. So the more you can keep fortifying that safety within yourself, the more prepared you'll be for those kinds of comments.
Was there, when it comes from maybe somebody in your inner circle, have you journeyed through kind of navigating like boundary setting and limit setting within that? And what maybe did you find most helpful for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an ongoing journey. I think boundary setting, it's not something we learn once and we set our boundaries and then we're good. Like it's
Right.
ongoing throughout our lives with each person that comes into our lives, and also as we navigate relationships as they change. I still was on a call with my therapist yesterday talking about how there's a family member that I'm realizing I don't really feel supported by. Like pretty
Mm.
much every time we talk, I leave the conversation feeling like a tightness in my chest and like a defensive energy. Like, wow, I just had to like defend everything I said or everything I'm doing for like most of the call.
Yeah.
And it was almost liberating because I was able to name that and then realize, okay, that's going to inform how I show up to that relationship now. It's going to
Mm.
inform how much of what they say I take in as fact and how much I'm letting them into my innermost thought life and my inner circle. Um, yeah, I think it's a continue evaluation process, and continuing to check in with those physical sensations will help because your body will tell you how you feel with people
Yeah.
if you're listening. And so if you're realizing, wow, every time I hang out with this person, I'm feeling this like tension,
Mm-hmm.
maybe this is someone that I need a little renegotiation of my boundaries with. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Or maybe this is someone that I just don't discuss certain topics with because I actually don't value what they have to add to those
Mm-hmm.
topics.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely something that I've realized where, one of my loved ones, a family member, might be someone that I feel so happy when I get to joke around casual stuff about, make little jokes about whatever old memories. And I might love to talk with them about stuff that they're excited about. And I might love to talk with them about, the animals or whatever. But parenting is not on the table for discussion. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to just say that, listen, I'm not really interested in anything you have to add to that. So let's talk about something we like to talk about.
Yeah.
And just continuing to show up to those boundaries with love and consistency and reset them as many times as needed. And if people flat out aren't respecting them, then there's even more
Mm-hmm.
communication that needs to happen. Maybe this is
Yeah.
someone I only exchange emails with since they won't respect my boundaries on the phone. You continue have to like reassess how things are going, but it doesn't have to be combative. It can be done
Mm-hmm.
with grace, I think, is something I believe.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that, kind of consistently checking in and do we need some renegotiations here?
Hmm.
And it almost sounds kind of like a flexibility, and that's something that and that maybe you do have to kind of state it multiple times, which I absolutely can appreciate. Sometimes that's really frustrating.
Yeah.
Um, and but that's exactly it. I think that when I I remember kind of reading when I was learning about some of that, in grad school even, just that it was like a broken record, and some of the key pieces were, sometimes you do have to be a broken record, but just really kind of knowing and trusting, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, that what's your body sending you? What is your body telling you that, yeah, this doesn't sit great, that this is kind of really draining a lot of my energy. And so that in itself, I imagine, then also impacts how you're able to show up for the people that you really want to show up for in a different way. And when you're all, like you said,
Absolutely.
kind of tightened up. And so but that there are ways to set those boundaries with respect to them, but also very much respect to yourself as well. Because I think
Yeah.
sometimes people are like, oh, I'm going to set a boundary. And so it has to, like, it's almost like a reactive boundary where now,
Mm-hmm.
like, we're like shouting at them, and, it doesn't land in
You
that
didn't respect my
respect.
boundary. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
That's why I said
yeah.
it doesn't have to be combative.
Exactly. So I
Yeah.
love that, and I appreciate you kind of pointing that out, because I think that's such an important one,
Yeah.
because it does come up, and like you said, sometimes it does come from those people that are closest, and when you are making those changes and those growths, that it's difficult. Even change is hard for anybody, especially to kind of, if you've been going in a certain kind of pattern for so long with a particular person, especially like your family of origin, right? We've been doing
Mm-hmm.
that pattern for years and years and years, that it
Mm-hmm.
can have a lot of those growing pains. And I love, like you said, kind of really, really finding those ways to honor the signals that your body is trying to send to you, because
Yeah.
they're likely not coming from just nothing, right?
Yeah. One thing that was helpful for me was learning about hard boundaries and soft boundaries.
Mm.
And so sometimes we have a hard boundary that's like, I will never, ever be around anyone who hits me. Like, hard
Yeah.
boundary, full stop, not available for that at
Mm-hmm.
all. Um, but then a soft boundary might be like, I might sometimes work through someone who raises their voice a little bit. Like, if they raise their voice and it is very short and they catch themselves and they take
Mm.
ownership of it and apologize, and I can see that they are doing the work on themselves to get some external help with that and learn nonviolent communication, I might still stay in connection with that person.
Yeah.
They might not be someone that I have in my home, but I might still call them. I might still meet up with them in public. I might still, happily spend time with them, maybe even in their home, and watch their healing journey. So, like, a soft boundary would be like, I usually wouldn't make space for someone who like loses their shit and screams. But like this instance, I soften my boundary for this person because it's a specific case where I can see the growth and I can see that it's a changing process and a healing process.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, or it might be something where like a soft boundary could be, um, I don't, I don't share finances with lovers could be a boundary, but then I soften it in certain situations. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's something we both really want to go in on together and we've discussed it and it feels safe and good. I could soften that boundary or,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And I love that reframing, like you said, of firm, versus like the softer ones.
Yeah.
So as we close up today, one of the questions that I'd love to ask my guests is, if you had access to a DeLorean, is there a particular age range that you would want to go to, and not to change anything, but to offer yourself, whether it's a hug or maybe some words?
A
When would
DeLorean
you go
is like a
back?
time machine.
Yes. Sorry. So I'm from the age where we watch Back to the Future.
Oh, I have
And
seen
so,
those movies like a long time ago. I forgot that I was
um,
like literally just like Googling what's a DeLorean.
yes, a time machine.
It's the car,
When,
right?
yes, it is the car.
Okay, okay, okay.
What age would you go back to, and what would you offer yourself?
I the first age that's coming through is age 8. I think that I think they just need to hear you're right.
Mm.
Because there's just a lot of undermining of my own instincts and my own intuition of what was happening. And yeah, I think they just need to hear you're right.
Wow.
And you're gonna see how right you are, girl.
I
Yeah.
love that. And such,
Uh,
it's two words, but so powerful. I
yeah.
absolutely love that. Thank you.
Yeah. I love that
So
question. It's like internal family systems time machine. Let's go.
yes.
I love that.
Well, thank you for journeying with me back in time.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. Okay, before I let you go, when we say goodbye to everybody, for anybody who wants to connect with you or receive any of the services that you offer, this is our shameless plug section. So please plug away. Where can people find you? What are you offering? Go for it.
Yeah, amazing. I'm on Instagram as Weeping Willow Wellness. And if you're interested in music, it's Fermata Blaize, FermataBlaize. And my signature one-on-one coaching framework is called the Whole Body Communicator. It's a holistic modality I created where we use somatic tools to heal communication with the body. So, as I referenced a lot during our chat today,
Mm-hmm.
relearning how to listen to those gut instincts, relearning how to keep that communication, that bottom up communication flowing throughout our day to day life. Communication with the body. We heal communication with the self. So we use transformational language, mindset work, motivational interviewing, different forms of somatic cognitive behavioral therapy to work with any mental blocks or unhelpful thought patterns, language patterns that are not supporting our change. Communication with body, communication with self, and then lastly, communication with others. So that's where we would work through boundary setting or how we're making offers, how we're asking for our needs, and work on the actual communication strategies. A lot of communication coaches just dive straight into the interpersonal communication, which if it's not supported by a soothed soma and an empowered mind, is not going to stick. We're not going to be able to actually make a change
Mm-hmm.
because we can't make change if our nervous system is in hyper or hypoarousal. We can't make a change if we have core beliefs or character statements that are blocking us from even being in growth mindset. So that's why my program starts with those two things, and then we work the communication aspect. So
Wonderful.
I'm really proud of the results that this program is having for people. I would love to help more people. And there will be a group version of the program coming out later this year. So super excited about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
make sure to look out for that. As always, all of that information links are going to be in our show notes. So for anybody listening, make sure you pop down there, check it out, and connect with Blaize if that resonates with you. Um, Blaize, thank you so much for sharing your special sauce recipe. I'm excited to try it. And for sharing your story, helping us pull back that curtain and normalize that this thing is really, really hard as a parent. And thank you everyone for listening in today. Make sure to come back next time for more food for thought and thoughtful food. We'll see you next time. If you or anyone that you know is struggling with any of the topics that we discussed in today's episode, make sure to check out our show notes for support and resources. You can get help. Thanks again for joining us on today's episode of The Real Family Eats. If you're a parent ready to share your real life parenting story, make sure to reach out to us in our website found in the show notes. And that goes for today's recipe, social medias, support, and resources. All of that can be found in our show notes. So make sure to check them out. And make sure to follow, like, share, subscribe, and stay up to date on all things The Real Family Eats. I hope you'll join us next time for more food for thought and thoughtful food. Enjoy your eats.